Hello class, welcome to the first video lesson. You need to know that this first video is going to be more of a tutorial, meaning that I'm going to explain a little bit more than I normally would. If you need to pause the video at home, when you watch these videos at home, feel free to do so if you need to get the notes copied down or if you need to replay something to hear it again. That's the advantage of these videos. Now, since we're watching this video in class, you may need to raise your hand and ask me to pause it or to go back over something. Let's go ahead and get started. So, you need to put down everything that I have on my notebook paper in your notes. And that includes this headline top part. The 1-2, it stands for the section that we are in the textbook. Most of this stuff is taken from the textbook. So if you were using your textbook, you could go to section 1-2. That stands for chapter 1, section 2. And it's called adding and subtracting decimals. And it's found on page 8. There's no need to go right now to that page. This is just for you for later on. If you need to see more examples or work additional problems, you can go to that section. Now let's look at the work that we're going to be doing. Now this is review. If you do not remember how to add and subtract decimals, don't worry, we're going to review you, but you better get caught on quick because we're not spending very much time on it. All right, our first example, we have 3.87 plus 2.5. Go ahead and get that written in your notes and include the EX, for example. Now I want you to write it like this, okay? Because that is how you're going to see it on worksheets and textbooks and things. They write it like that. But when we're adding or subtracting decimals, it's important to remember that the decimals must be lined up. So we need to rewrite this to make it easier for us, okay? So we have this nice bit of space. I would skip a line, honestly, and start here. So I'm going to put 3.87 plus 2.5. You see our decimals are lined up. If you have any gaps, you need to fill those in with zeros. So put a 0 there. Put our little bar, and now we're going to add. 7 plus 0, 7. 8 plus 5, well that's 13. Carry the 1, and you end up with 6.37. Now it would be helpful if we box in our answer or write it nice and neat over here even. That way it helps our answer to stand out when we're grading it or looking for it, and it's not all in this jumbled mess over here. See how much more it's easy to find the answer to the problem when it's written like this? Now let's look at subtraction. If we have this kind of problem right here for subtraction, we follow the same rules. We're going to line our decimals up. Let's skip a line. We have 46.2 minus 38.25. Fill in gaps, like I said, with zeros. We got a gap right there. We put a 0 there. Now, if you notice, if I say 0 minus 5, I can't do that. Doesn't work. We have to borrow. This becomes a 1. This becomes a 10. Okay? So 10 minus 5 is 5. 1 minus 2, I can't do that. I'm going to have to borrow again. That becomes a 5, and this becomes an 11. 11 minus 2, 9. And right here, our next part, go ahead and put the decimal. A lot of students forget that. Please do not forget to put the decimal down. So we will then say 5 minus 8. I'm going to have to borrow again. I have 15. 15 minus 8. Well, that would be 7. 3 minus 3 is 0. We don't have to put that there. So we're left with 7.95. So 7.95. That is our answer. We're boxing it in so it's easy to find and easy to see. Something else about adding or subtracting if you have more than two numbers that you're adding together, there are some rules that can make it a little easier, all right? So let's take a look at those. Let's say you have an example like this, where you have 4.4 plus 5.7 plus 0.6. Now, if you don't remember this, or if you didn't know this, when it comes to addition, you can add them in any order. It doesn't matter how it's written. For instance, you can say something like 5 plus 2 is equal to 2 plus 5. Those two are the same thing. By the way, that's known as commutative property. You're going to learn more about that later on. It's not important to remember that that's called the commutative property, but that's what it's called. Another thing says that I'm allowed to add numbers like this. I can say 7 plus 3 plus 5 is equal to 7 plus 3 plus 5. And one says, well, I can add the 3 and the 5 together first and get 8, and then I'd have 8 plus 7. Or I could add the 7 and the 3 together to get 10. And then I would add the 10 to 5 to get 15. So either way, you're going to get the same answer. It doesn't matter what order you add them in. So sometimes there's numbers that are easier to add together than others, and that's what I'm trying to point out here. So if you look over here, I noticed, being a math teacher and all, and some of you might notice, that it would be far easier to go ahead and add this with this, because that would help us get rid of our decimals. So let's go ahead and write this down first so we can get rid of them. You could write them down as a list. That's true. I'm showing this to the students who might need to see it this way. So one way to do it is just to write it out as a list and not worry about any of this stuff. And just add them together, not times, add. So we could do it that way. But another way is to say, well, add the 0.6 to the 4.4 first. What does that make? Anyone in the room know? Well, that would be 5. Because if you add these two together first, add these two, you would get 10. Carry the 1, you get 5. And that helps get rid of our decimal. See, we no longer have a decimal in the spot right here. And then we could just add the 5.7 to the 5, and we end up with 10.7. Now you could have done it this way and still gotten the answer. You could have said 4 plus 7, which would have been 11. 11 plus 6 is 17, so we put the 7 there. We carry the 1. We'd say 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 5 is 10, and you'd still get the same thing. This is just for people who happen to see patterns. They say, hey, it'd be easier for me to go ahead and add these two together and then add the 5.7. Now, some people find this easier, or some people find this easier. Either way is fine, because you notice that we get the same answer. 10.7. So, regardless of what method you use, it's fine. So, key things to remember for this section is it's vitally important that you line your decimals up. If you don't do it, you will fail. All right, now it's time for questions.